for joining me here today.
So great to be here.
So we have a lot of themes to dig into today, but first of all, for those in the audience unfamiliar with StockX, can you explain the platform and the business model?
Sure, so we're an online marketplace that connects buyers and sellers to trade and consume what we call current culture, which represents sneakers, apparel, accessories, those hard to find, sought after items from the best brands in the world. And as a marketplace, we operate on a global platform, serving customers in over 200 countries and territories around the world, and a purely online business.
Amazing. And who is the StockX customer, both the buyer and the seller?
So it's really interesting. If you look at the consumer here in the GCC, we heard on the prior panel, most of our customers are under the age of 35. And so we think of Gen Z, Gen Alpha, a digitally and mobile native customer who is influenced and inspired by what they see socially. And so the expectation of that consumer is to be able to see anything that they want, that they see on the foot of an athlete or an influencer, and to be able to have access to that product at any time. And so that ability to be inspired and have instantaneous desire for a product, and then to be able to access it is something that marketplaces are uniquely able to deliver on that experience.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll definitely come on to the possibilities for the GCC shortly. First of all, what white space did StockX fill, and what kind of drives people to the platform?
Well, when you think about, again, if you start from the viewpoint of that consumer and the expectations of that consumer, and you look at what they're not able to get in either retail experience or other online experience. The challenge was essentially access to the most sought after products from brands around the world. And so if you're a consumer here and a product is released in Tokyo or in London, you may not have access to that product. And so access was one of the things that we provided to a consumer around the world of current culture. And then there was a lot that we had to do to be able to build the infrastructure to be able to deliver a trusted experience. Because one of the challenges associated with marketplaces where you run and operate a marketplace where you don't own the product and you have to trust a seller to be able to deliver that experience to the buyer. StockX really innovated in the area of standing in the middle of the transaction between the seller and the buyer, and we verify every product that's sold on our platform. And we're checking for a buyer experience, but verifying that product before it gets into the hands of the consumer. And we were able to do that in a quite a disruptive way, and to be able to create one of the largest marketplaces in the world as a result of that.
And how do you verify? Because I know different resale platforms have very different authentication models, from human to technology.
Yeah, and so again, when you start and you look at our platform today, we actually released a brand protection report just this last week. And we highlighted the fact that we have verified over 55 million products now through our platform. Last year alone, through that verification process that includes both technology, so you think about machine learning, algorithm-based data that we have based on those numbers of transactions, and then the human expertise, the knowledge that we've built out over the years, we're leveraging, again, that technology and people infrastructure across millions of items and hundreds of brands. And what we highlighted this last year is that we rejected 325,000 transactions on our platform that did not meet our verification standards. And so for us, we deliver that service to ultimately build trust with a consumer who on our platform doesn't know who the seller is. They just are coming to the platform to say, I want this product.
Yeah, absolutely, because on StockX, the seller isn't necessarily centered in the way that they are on other resale platforms to build that trust, I guess.
Yeah, so if you look at most other marketplaces, they would be what I would call listings-based marketplace. So I'm selling this item, I would upload the description, I would have all of the product images associated with that one product. On StockX, we have a single product page. Now, we're only selling brand new items, so it's brand new items that have never been worn or used. However, they could have been recently released or released 10 or 15 years ago, but it's still in that perfect condition. And so different than other marketplaces, we standardize the experience around a product. And what makes StockX a very dynamic platform, particularly for this next generation of consumers, is that we actively show the current value of that product. And if you're a buyer, you can see what it's traded for. If you're a seller, you can see what price you could potentially sell it for. And it's one of the most engaging aspects of our experience is the real-time nature or the dynamic aspect of pricing on our marketplace. And so you think about that different than a retail experience where you have a sticker price. Ours is more like a stock market.
Right, hence the name.
Hence the name.
And I think that's really interesting because it really reflects, particularly in my research, I've found that Gen Z in particular see fashion as a commodity today. They see sneakers as a commodity. It's about an investment in the way that maybe older generations would think about investing in property, or people are investing in Birkins and sneakers.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that you have this marketplace that reflects that desire.
Yeah, it's interesting. It works for all sorts of different types of buyers. On the point that you just made, it's great that we're enabling essentially retail product as an asset class. That you could invest in it if you're able to identify the inefficiencies of pricing in markets or in regions or exchange rates. You're able to leverage this platform to take advantage of those different inefficiencies that exist as product and is distributed around the world. But then there's also a set of consumers that wants to wear the product, and we're fine with that also. And so it works as a platform that you could both trade or own it as an asset, but also wear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to talk about the state of the resale market, because I know during COVID, both e-commerce more broadly and resale completely boomed. E-commerce has been struggling lately. We've seen, some major retailers collapse in recent weeks. Where are we at with resale? What's the state of resale?
Well, it turns out that the pandemic and the associated stimulus associated with the pandemic was a massive demand shock for the world. $10 trillion went into the hands of consumers, and they spent it. And so both brands and marketplaces built out this infrastructure that on the other side of it, we had in the middle of still global tough times. And then there's been the delevering associated with the post-COVID world. And I think that's challenged a lot of brands and distribution channels that built out supply chains for what they thought was a much larger demand environment than it turned out to be. And so what happens in a marketplace, and StockX would reflect the value or the supply-demand imbalances in market. Many brands have too much supply out in the market. They're not able to sell it. That oversupply represents then a price depreciation of many of those products that don't sell. And so we see that very much reflected in the market right now. And I think it'll still be a few more quarters before all of that works its way through the system overall. But resale as a market is tens of billions of dollars in the US. It's projected to be a $70 billion market alone. And again, I think it's representative of a class of consumers that want to consume product that way. And it's in addition to retail, but it is a way of consuming that typically many brands have a hard time reaching to a digitally or mobile native audience in a way that resonates with them.
Absolutely, and I wanted to dig into sneakers specifically because I know the sneaker market, again, during the pandemic had a massive explosion. That growth peak has kind of normalized now, and also I know that some brands like Nike have been criticized for a lack of innovation, so a kind of lack of newness of these cult styles. You mentioned there as well, they've saturated the market, some of these brands as well. How is that reflected on StockX? Have you seen effects of that?
So again, StockX reflects the intersection of supply and demand. And I think this is a really interesting time right now because there are brands that have oversaturated, oversupplied the market, and you see that reflected in the prices. Where brands don't innovate, that's also reflected in the prices. But when we look at the sneaker marketplace as well, there are brands that are really doing exceptionally well in the resale market. New Balance has been on a 5-year growth trajectory, is really releasing exciting product to the consumer. ASIC's another brand that's seeing triple-digit plus growth on the platform. Hoka, On, Uggs, Crocs. These are now what we would call the shoe category, right. But they're capturing the attention of the consumer, but they're leveraging collaborations with artists, celebrities. They're leveraging scarcity models to be able to drive brand heat and brand awareness, and are creating real excitement and buzz around their brands, also leveraging social channels to promote that. And so we see that rise reflected in the marketplace. And so, again, I think we see the rise and fall day to day as reflecting consumer demand and what brands are putting out.
And that's the benefit of having such a breadth of brands and a breadth of type of brands on your marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, if I think of the challenge that we would have if we were to try to predict a year ahead as to what the consumer would want, it's very, very difficult. And as a marketplace, we're able to instantaneously, and I say to the day or the hour, to be able to introduce product pages that reflect things that could trade on the platform. Stanley mugs, I would have never thought would become a thing on StockX, and they've become a big thing on StockX because it's a brand, again, not necessarily in the sneaker or the streetwear space, but captured and leveraged same types of strategies to deliver a great consumer experience.
And I know you mentioned Stanley Cups there, that's one category, but are there other categories as well that are performing well?
So for us, the largest categories outside of our largest category, which would be sneakers and shoes, which I highlighted before, is apparel, accessories, collectibles, electronics, and those are also in their own lanes, also really exciting for that demographic of consumer that we're appealing to.
And you mentioned there earlier about the marketplaces, being able to react instantaneously, and they kind of naturally react instantaneously to what's trending and what people are into. What other benefits are there to the marketplace model, particularly in this landscape where retail, multi-brand retail and e-commerce is struggling?
So the marketplace model, there's a couple things that you have to do really well. And in a marketplace model that are a couple aspects. One, you have to be able to have access to global inventory around the world instantaneously. And so that's a unique aspect of a marketplace experience that we can deliver. Marketplaces are also, by definition, dynamically priced. And so to be able to compete in the marketplace, you have to compete based on price at that moment in time. And so when you think about most models today are more static in pricing, not dynamic in pricing, you fall out from a whole set of consumers that sort of expect that prices would reflect that. And then you have to be technology enabled first. That has to be the very first orientation to be able to operate a marketplace. And so, I think when you look at today, and this is going back for the trends for a while, more and more brands are going to direct to consumer and want to have a relationship direct with consumer, but that means you have to be the best at technology-enabled experiences as well. Which, again, that means hiring great engineers, having machine learning data scientists to be able to use the latest in AI. And those are the things that we think about every single day because our experience is right here, and this is it. And so this experience has to be seamless, accessible to a consumer anywhere around the world at all times.
It feels like brands have something to learn, platforms like yours.
Well, I mean, it's both ways because there's a lot, obviously, that we depend on for brands to be able to inspire a set of consumers. And I think where there's intersection between the two, I think this is the opportunity ahead, which is if you looked at a few years ago, many brands going omni-channel, which would mean being digital, be able to have access to a consumer in a digital environment. Now you see all of this activity in the marketplaces. This is where we see opportunity for partnership between brands and marketplaces to come together.
And I know that StockX has done that, so you've partnered with New Balance, among other brands. Can you explain those partnerships and how they work?
So we've had brand partnerships that have leveraged the platform to be able to release product. It's typically in the form of a drop or a release of a limited edition or limited number of items on the platform itself. And then I think increasingly we're really seeking to have brand partnerships around the verification process itself. Because this is where we're very aligned in the desire to make sure that the consumer is getting the right product, branded product, authentic product to the consumer. And so we have partners that we're exploring these relationships around, well, who is that consumer? What are they purchasing this product for? At what prices? What are the regions and the price points that are interesting? This is data that we have readily available in the marketplace that we are looking to see where that data can be really valuable to our partners.
I mean, I've used StockX data so much in my reporting. It's great for tracking styles that are trending, new categories like the outdoors running category that we talked about. When I was writing about that, I used data from StockX, so I can see why it would be useful to brands as well. And I wanted to talk about the Middle East particularly because I know in this market, bricks and mortar still is extremely dominant. But what potential do you think there could be here for marketplaces like StockX?
Well, when we think about the retail experience, we have a very few retail locations, but where we do, they operate almost as reverse logistics centers. Because again, we're serving a market of both sellers and buyers. And so if you were to go to our small retail experience in Hong Kong, we have thousands of items that are being dropped off there every single day by sellers that are going out into the retail experience, seeing that I can buy this product in this market, I can sell it for more on StockX, they'll buy it, drop it off at our location, and so it's almost working as reverse retail. Right. And so what we see is sort of these different models for both distribution as well as logistics and fulfillment that happen right in that location. But again, we're starting with the premise that that product could reach a consumer anywhere in the world, and anywhere where there's inefficiencies in pricing or distribution, the seller in this case could leverage those inefficiencies to distribute the product themselves.
I think in terms of the buyer as well, it's really interesting right now because I think brands are trying to be so exclusive that regional exclusives are becoming so important. We're seeing that in luxury, but I think in sportswear, sneakers, and et cetera as well, where you've got a client. I spoke to some personal shoppers the other day who do concierge, and they were saying they had a client in Kuwait who wanted a Tokyo exclusive of a watch and was desperate to get it, but that's not possible. But with a marketplace, that is more possible.
We are a borderless platform, and I was just in Seoul and Tokyo, and we were talking about this very thing. A brand releasing a product or a brand that's located in Tokyo is accessible to a consumer everywhere around the world. And that's true on our platform in terms of the global reach that we have from a buyer perspective of tens of millions of buyers that come to the platform every single month. And so you think of that as borderless commerce for one. And then the second thing is really about that pricing, because a lot of times brands will price product differently by region. For us, pricing is also borderless. Right. And on our platform, every time a buyer is purchasing something, they're buying it at the lowest price the lowest price globally at any point in time. And so that idea of being able to purchase a product that might be able to take advantage of exchange rates, as an example, or pricing disparities, or maybe it's not a product that is particularly attractive in this region, right, but it's attractive to a buyer in another region. Sellers will acquire that product in one region and move it to another. So it's very dynamic in terms of the way the marketplace evolves.
Absolutely. And before we run out of time, just one final question to round us off. I mean, we've talked a lot about the state of the resale market, but looking ahead, what do you think the future looks like?
I think we're looking at a very exciting world. We recently released, and we're one of the first platforms for the immersive experience with the Vision Pro in Apple. Okay. And so we're envisioning our experience that started on a mobile device and started on a platform in more immersive formats. And so that's one thing. And then we're really excited about how generative AI and AI generally can deliver different experiences and personalized experiences across the platform as well. So technology-enabled experiences that connect the digital and the physical, connect marketplaces to brands, to retail. A very connected world in terms of how this operates is what we see in the future.
Oh, well, exciting times. Can't wait to try the Vision Pro. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.